Welcome to the Design Dash podcast, your guide to designing a life you love. Join us as we explore the keys to living the life you want without compromise. Welcome to the Design Dash podcast, your guide to designing a life that you love. We're going to start every podcast, as we always do, by thanking our wonderful sponsors at Monogram Luxury Appliances. They have been a great partner for us at the Laura Design Collective, which is our design firm in Houston, and now they're a great partner for us here at Design Dash. And we love them because they believe in three main pillars that we can easily get behind as creatives, and that is materials, performance, and ownership. And we know that they uphold their commitment to high quality, to innovation, and their ongoing relationships with designers and with homeowners. We absolutely love working with them. Thanks, Monogram.
Thanks, Monogram. And today we are just me and Melissa. You can see we don't have a guest today. Melissa and I are, me and Melissa, we were just having this conversation. Good Lord. Melissa and I will be talking about wellness because it is Endometriosis Awareness Month. It is International Women's Day this month. We just celebrated that. And so we're going to be talking today about women and wellness and healthcare, and maybe touch on topics like gender bias in medicine, cultural stereotypes when it comes to women and advocating for their own health, different women's health movements, historical misdiagnoses, those kinds of things. So we'll just jump right in. Melissa, if you want to kick us off, tell us about your own experience.
Yeah, well, I mean, I think that every woman has their own experience, their own unique experience and challenges when it comes to their healthcare. And, of course, everything is fine. And then I think until for me, when I turned 35, was when I received my fibroid and adenomyosis diagnosis. So I don't have endo. I mean, I'm sure there's probably some in there. Of course, they never know until they cut you open, right? But so I suffer from adenomyosis, which is very similar. And it took me a very long time to really get a good diagnosis and to also find a doctor, I think, who could understand my symptoms in a way where I felt like I was being heard and listened to. I mean, Laura knows about this whole journey. Like I went to a couple of different doctors, different OBGYNs. I got an MRI. I was going to go down the radiology route, and then they were just like, oh, but you're also pregnant. Something that my doctors didn't tell me until I was, almost into my second trimester. I knew that something was wrong with me.
Surprise.
More so than in my other pregnancy with my daughter. And yet it was just like I was almost being treated like a hysterical woman. And, I've shared that experience with some of my other friends, and they unfortunately are able to say, you know what, something very similar happened to me. And I can now say that I have a very fabulous OBGYN who was able to deliver my son very successfully, listened to me the entire time, even when my birth plan came to a very scary moment while I was in labor. But she really coached me through that, and I appreciated that. Another thing, too, I think is kind of going the Eastern medicine route. I started seeing an acupuncturist last fall due to, fibroid pain and just terrible periods. And I was so pleased with the intake that she had. I mean, she sat with me for maybe 30 minutes and asking me all of these kinds of questions, not necessarily like, what was your blood pressure like and your weight, which she asked those too. But it was also like asking about eating habits. If I felt cold or if I was running hot sometimes, was my mouth dry, these kind of strange things that I'd never been asked as a doctor before. And came up with a plan and have been pain-free since then. And I mean, I'm still on the fence about how I feel about the veracity of this kind of treatment, but I do know that it works. So that's just my long-winded explanation of, I'm 39 now. So 4 years of trying to figure out what's wrong, to get help and to get treatment that works. What about you, Laura?
This is I think it's probably a similar, for a lot of women, a really similar journey. And two really commonly misdiagnosed conditions for women are endometriosis, or something similar, like what your diagnosis ultimately ended up being, or autoimmune disease. And so for me, I don't have endometriosis, but autoimmune disease yes, I have Hashimoto's thyroiditis, which I was not diagnosed with until probably 4 years after I had my twin girls, Liv and Ryan. And so it also took, so similar to you, it was a journey getting this diagnosis because there are different levels of acceptability with thyroid, with that thyroid diagnosis. So there's the normal level. And so mine was on the low end of normal, but my typical doctor just said, you know what, you're on low end of normal, you're fine. I was exhausted all the time. And it's funny, you mentioned like, is your mouth dry? Are your extremities cold all the time? And a lot of these are indicators of autoimmune or other diseases. And so this was a question that I really delved into with my doctor that I ended up changing to about 4 years after I had my daughters. And so she is more of a East meets West medical practitioner, which I really appreciated. She is no longer delivering babies. She's an OBGYN, but she is no longer delivering babies, but she's really focused on meeting women where they are and sitting and listening to you and really asking those deeper questions that can get to the root of the problem. And so we would sit and have tea for 45 minutes and really talk through, and she's not a therapist, but we would sit and have tea and talk about, how are you feeling? Like, where is it in your body? How are you feeling with anxiety? How's your sleep? Night sweats, all of those things, which, women in their late 30s and 40s were probably into perimenopause, which is a whole other topic. Well, it's part of this topic. But asking those questions and really having those conversations. And I think it's not just about doing high level blood work. It's about talking and really listening. It's a lot to do with listening and believing women, because historically, you said earlier, like hysteria, that was an actual diagnosis. We are not hysterical. We actually have things going on. And yes, we have babies and we have menstrual cycles that start when we're young. And we have pain throughout our entire lives. And it just becomes expected as women that we're in pain. And it's not hysteria. Like, there are real underlying medical issues that we have to advocate for and really talk through with our practitioners to uncover. That's been my journey. And now I'm seeing a couple of different doctors that have really helped me treat and figure out ways to not cope, but really not just pills, not just medication, but also methods to help work through different things that we have going on.
Mm-hmm. Well, you bring up a great point about that mind-body connection, even though I think that sometimes we can get dismissed as being anxious or hysterical, which actually comes from the Greek word for uterus. So thousands of years ago, they just felt like women were,
of course it does,
had a displaced uterus and maybe sex could fix them. They either weren't having enough orgasms or maybe they were having too much. Like, it was all related to the mystery around how women address their own sexual liberation, right? But I was actually reading in The Guardian just about endometriosis itself, and how some women are feeling like their endometriosis treatment is being looked at as almost like a failure of the mind. So it's Kate Young. She's a public health researcher at Monash University in Australia, and she was researching endometriosis patients and what were they doing in order to get treated? Because right now, the only surefire 100% way to get diagnosed with endometriosis is to actually have a hysterectomy and to have a biopsy and have that tissue looked at and observed. And many of the women that she was interviewing were just like, it just felt like there was a lot of psychology as much as there was pathology in gynecology, which is a huge mouthful. But I think when you're talking about being heard and being listened to, I think that's the research that we need to do, right? I mean, so many of the medical biases that we have right now and the research that we have has been done on men. And that's why historically we just don't have a lot of that information with women. So I think that, like, we're at this really interesting time right now where us speaking to our doctors, like, we're building that research and the information behind how to treat these diseases. Because I think that it's not like a one size fits all sort of thing. I mean, I'm sure your symptoms have come on very differently than another person on our team who does suffer from endometriosis. It seems very, very different than even mine, which is very similar than my best friend who went through the same thing, and her treatment was very different. So I think that just all goes back to you saying about you have to advocate for yourself. Like as soon as you realize that something is wrong, you've got to, I guess, like doctor shop and find something. I'd love to learn more about how you found your functional medicine doctor, because this is an avenue I haven't gone down yet, but I'm really interested in.
Yeah. And I mean, really, it was just through talking with my friends about symptoms and what we're all experiencing and what has been successful for them. And I think as far as advocacy, like having that community around you is critical. That's one of the biggest things that you can do to really support yourself and your friends and your family, your female family members, I think, is just to build that community. And so that's how I found my doctors, plural, is through just friends who have been down similar roads. I have a friend that has PMDD, and it's to the point where she pretty much just has to be alone for a week out of every month. And it's serious. It's not putting on a show. It is real. And it's really tough. And so I think she's been through many doctors, all of which give her different paths to treatment. And she's tried a lot of different things. But she actually had worked with one doctor that was really successful for her in Houston. And so I ended up working directly with this doctor, Monica Robertson. And she's wonderful. And she's the one that was the East meets West. We sit and have tea doctor. And even though I don't live in Houston anymore, I still keep in touch with her. She's fabulous. And then actually I have a doctor here in Aspen, which is where I live now. And I found him just through, probably Google. I say Google, but that's a lie. He was he was downstairs from my office in Aspen, actually. So he was very convenient. Aspen's it's a small town. Like there's not a lot of places to office. So, but yeah, he was downstairs from me, and this doctor has actually really helped me work through my thyroid issues even further. He is keeping an eye on my hormone levels, since I actually did have a hysterectomy end of 2022, because when I was going through my fertility treatments with my twins, ultimately I had two girls, I discovered I had fibroids, pretty major fibroids. And so I did have a hysteroscopy, which is the only reason they were found. And I was suffering a lot of different symptoms because of these fibroids. So fast forward, I had a hysterectomy 10 years after I had my daughters, to once and for all deal with them, because I was just done with having to suffer monthly from having really large fibroids. And so I did keep my ovaries though. And so my doctor now we do quarterly blood work. He is not looking for normal ranges for hormones. He is looking for optimal. And so I have, I'm not on hormone replacement therapy yet. I'm still in perimenopause. And so we're just keeping a close eye on that. But I will say my health has turned around 180 degrees since I had my hysterectomy and started working with this doctor. Yeah, but I think it's through community, through network, that I have really found the people that have worked best for me. And keeping an open mind too, because it may not be that a pill or a surgery or a shot it's not a solution for everyone. It could be a combination of things.
And did you feel like you were on a pill or a shot before you found your functional medicine doctor? Was that the big difference?
I feel like I wasn't on anything. I think it was more of just like a grin and bear it. It was more of just like, you know what, you're in your late 30s. Like, this is what it looks like now. And I don't think that is a freaking solution. I think that like suffering through something even if it is going through perimenopause or menopause, which are natural and they're going to happen. But there are still things you can do to help with the symptoms that are normal and occur during that time of your life. And I'm a big proponent for doing everything you can. So you're not just suffering in silence or suffering with your small community together. Like, you don't have to suffer. I think that there are things that you can do to address these. And I'm willing to do whatever, anything it takes. And it's a lot of research and a lot of self-advocacy. And then really talking to your network and sharing openly so that you can come to a solution for yourself.
And do you see somebody else outside of your PCP? And I bring that up because I feel like, and it could just be because I've had issues with fibroids and they're terrible. And I just feel like I need somebody who's also an advocate for my care as a woman. And now as I'm getting older, I went to my doctor the other day. She's like, "Oh, you got to start getting your mammograms in a few months." Like, "Oh, that's going to be fun." But I'm also starting to think about, okay, so do I need to see another doctor to take care of just my overall health, not necessarily my women's health? One of the things that we were looking at as we were preparing for this podcast is that women are often more, like, I guess, twice as likely to be misdiagnosed than men. And a lot of that is because women just haven't been studied as much as men. One of the big ones is sleep apnea, which that's finally becoming a big issue. I think 90% of women out there who have sleep apnea are not diagnosed with it at all until, very, very late. And also heart disease. Women are twice as likely to suffer without diagnosis heart disease symptoms. So do you see like a female PCP who kind of understands these things? Because I'm looking for one who maybe understands that kind of literature.
I don't have a primary care physician.
Okay.
But I do have the doctor I was talking about, though. So I have a couple of different doctors. The doctor that I was talking about here in Aspen, I guess I would consider him my primary care, kind of. I mean, if I have a sinus infection or a cold or, something just really general, I'm one of those people that will just do telehealth. Like, just sign me up for telehealth. I will Zoom in and let's figure this out. But I do have
urgent care and quicker.
Urgent care, right? Like, make it easy. But for I do have an OBGYN here. So yes, I do see someone, annually for that's a whole situation because they're not a concierge doctor. My other doctor is very much a concierge doctor. I pay out of pocket. There is no insurance. I do blood work every quarter. I see him at least once a quarter, or I'm checking in, maybe even more often, but I'm paying a premium for that service. So I pay annually, and then I pay throughout the year for, supplements and anything that I need. It's out of pocket. Like, there's no insurance coverage, but I do see my OB. And so that's through insurance. However, just like you're going to get your mammogram, I'm doing the same thing. So I'm 46. I go every year. It's a pain in the ass because I called to make my appointment. I need a doctor's order to do that. I call my doctor. She can't see me until 4 months from now. And I think that's the reality for a lot of women, is that, like, you may need to get in to see your doctor, but it's going to take months. And so it's just like also thinking ahead. But my concierge doctor, I can call him and see him today. And that's because it's not insurance and I'm paying out of pocket. And I'm really lucky that I'm able to do that, because there are so many people that can't and need that kind of care. But what about you, Melissa? Who are you? Like, you're looking for a PCP, but why do you need that?
I have one. And honestly, I feel like I get more comprehensive care I feel like I get the most comprehensive care from my acupuncturist, actually. But I feel like I get the best care from my gynecologist, actually. But she and I, of course, had a very odd start, because I was going in there initially for fibroids. We thought that it was cancer. And then it turned out that I had huge, huge fibroids that were hiding my pregnancy. And she was the first of 4 doctors to really get me through that. So when I go in to see her, I really do appreciate that. But yeah, I often feel like I rarely go to my PCP. I go to her once a year, and she's also female. I go to her once a year. and we get blood work, which I'm also getting that blood work done at my gynecologist. And you had also mentioned something about optimal levels. Like there are some things where I'm a little bit low on, maybe even borderline high on, not optimal, and it's never addressed. So that's why I think I need to find something else. And but of course, another point is the expense and the time. I hope she doesn't mind me saying this, but we have somebody else on our team who also suffers from these kinds of issues, and she's starting to see a functional medicine doctor, but it's several $100s per session. And of course, the ideal time to go is every week. And that's just so prohibitive, I think, both in terms of the financial investment, but then also in terms of the time. But she's able to go, I think, every quarter or every 3 months, maybe more so in the beginning to get things started. And I guess I just wish that things were more available, like they were just easier to do, because it's so important. And I think that these conditions can be so debilitating. And then we as women, because, we start having our periods, anywhere from 11 to 16 years old, we're so used to every month just not feeling our best or feeling horrible. And you're right, we just suffer through it for years and years and years until we're like, okay, enough is enough. But
enough is enough. Take out my uterus. I'm done.
Right. Exactly. That's what I was going to say. By that point in time, your fibroids are the size of a grapefruit, like mine are, and you're like, oh, now I've got to go through a very intense invasive surgery to get this repaired.
Yeah. And maybe you and I are just like a mess. I don't know. But I think this is fairly common. I don't know, at least in my friend group, I think it's fairly common. And it is time, yes, and it's expense too. And just the research and educating yourself takes such a commitment. It's so much time. And then making the decisions, because you're not going to get one diagnosis and this is the solution. Mm-hmm. Medicine is a science, but it is not exact, and it is always changing. And so you're going to get, one solution from one doctor and then a completely different one from another. And so you make those decisions for yourself. And we're going through this with my daughter right now, who's diagnosed with scoliosis, and it's a completely different condition, but it's still, there's, conflicting information from every side. And so it's just making those decisions, educating and advocating for yourself. So I think, as far as the investment, it is an investment, which I made that investment with my body going through surgery, with my time, because it takes a ton of time, and then financially as well. But I will say, I feel better at 46 than I did at 36, because I'm addressing all of these things. And I started a year and a half ago, and I've come a long way since then, because I just made the decision, like, I am going to address these things. And I want those optimal levels. I don't want to settle for the normal range. I want to feel really freaking good. And so when we do blood work and I'm looking at thyroid, and yes, I have Hashimoto's, and I know what my thyroid levels should look like, but my doctor is with me on this, and we talk through it. We sit down and we talk about it. What do we want those levels to be? How are we going to get there? And it's not just like you do this once and it's done. It is a constant keeping an eye on and adjusting and changing medications. So you just really have to commit to doing that. And I think it's been the same for example, I do a testosterone supplement, which would have sounded crazy to me even 5 years ago as a woman. Like, really, I need testosterone? That's insane. But my levels were basically nil, like zero. Mm. And so since I've started that supplement, I feel like a new person. Like, sleep is huge when you're in this age range, I guess, and you're going through perimenopause or menopause, and sleep just is just fleeting. Like, it never happens. So that's been huge for me, just doing this testosterone supplement.
Yeah. Sleep, good diet, getting enough exercise, and then, of course, jamming all that into building a firm and managing a team and making sure your family's okay, and you got to make sure that you're okay. It's just, it becomes so much, I think, to balance. And I'm sure just the struggle of balancing it all is probably leading to these symptoms also, because, the psychology of it, the way that you feel in your mind is not separated from the way that you feel in your body. And I guess all that is to say, to wrap it up, is how can we make women's health mainstream? And that's actually the motto for the Society for Women's Health Research. So they are a big thought leader in advancing women's health putting it in front of people, making sure that the research is being done for women's health that is needed to be done, so we can differentiate ourselves from men and from others, but to really focus on female issues and how they manifest themselves in our bodies. So I wish we could be doing more on it, but we're not doctors, but we can at least shine a light on it and share our own stories, because as you said, Laura, the majority of my friends suffer from these kinds of issues also, especially now that we're middle-aged. All these new things are starting to pop up that we've got to research and advocate for.
Yeah. It's so much fun. It's something new every day. But I do think that, yes, this is a huge issue, just for women generally, but action that I feel like I've taken and would recommend to others, just because, I'm really big on action, is, like I said, research and educate yourself. And that may mean going down a rabbit hole on Google. And so take it with a grain of salt, what you find, but try to educate yourself as much as possible. I think I have found that, and maybe this is easier for me just because I'm a very assertive person, but really direct communication with your healthcare professionals about symptoms and concerns. And even if they feel so personal and maybe even embarrassing, just assertive communication is huge. And then building that support network, your friends, your family, just groups that have dealt with similar health challenges. That's been big for me. So I feel like education, communication, and that support network, those have been my 3 big things. How about you, Melissa? What do you recommend just on a personal level for someone going through this?
I think community is the biggest one. I wouldn't have even really realized that these were valid issues, which I think sounds bad, that these were valid issues until I started to so many of my friends about it. And they're like, oh yeah, well, I've been diagnosed with fibroids, or, I have adeno or endometriosis. And this is what those symptoms feel like, because they manifest themselves in so many different ways. Like I get a lot of really terrible back pain. It's almost like a sciatic pain, but it matches with my cycle. And I was just under the impression, oh, this is just normal. My periods are just bad, and it's not normal. So I think having a sounding board with other people who can then encourage you to be a little bit more direct with your doctor, because I think we all, maybe it's just me, but like, I don't, I'm always just like, yeah, I only have 3 drinks a week, when maybe last week I didn't, and I think that kind of seeps into then not being completely honest about all of the other symptoms that you're suffering from, which honestly, that's why that doctor is there. And I don't know if that's another female thing of just trying to minimize our discomfort, but I definitely do that. So I think that's great advice, is being very direct and being really assertive. And I wish I had done that for myself sooner, and maybe I would have found all of these issues, because they were lingering for a while. Maybe I would have been able to deal with it.
But you found them, and you're addressing them, and you're moving forward.
Yes. And open to addressing them in many different ways. Because I think, you get to a point where you're just like, all right, there's something wrong. I have to keep an open mind about this and to treat it, because I would rather treat it now and address it head on than silently suffer.
So I guess we could talk about this all day, but just a parting recommendation, if you're interested in this topic, is a book that actually my husband gave to me, and it's called Unwell Women, Misdiagnosis and Myth in a Man-Made World. So if you're watching this on YouTube, here's the book. Unwell Women. And it's really interesting because it talks about gender bias in medicine, historical misdiagnosis. So it's really taking you to the root, cultural stereotypes, but then it's also talking about different people's personal narratives and women's health movements. So it's a good book. If you have time, if you have interest, take a look.
Good recommendation. And I think that's a great place to end it. So everybody, thanks for joining us. Celebrate women this month. Maybe not celebrate endometriosis, but celebrate yourself by getting checked out if you're suffering from this.
Do not celebrate. We're not celebrating endometriosis, but we are taking action. Thank you for joining us on the Design Dash podcast, and we'll catch you on the next one.
Thanks, everybody. Thank you for listening. Make sure to check out our next podcast, coming live next week on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, or wherever you get your podcasts. In the meantime, you can find us and more wonderful stories like these on designdash.com. And make sure to follow us at Design Dasher on Instagram and TikTok. Till next time.